March 24, 1945. The clock showed 13:42 hours. Somewhere high above Berlin, Captain Robert Dice wrestled his P-51 Mustang into a climbing turn that pressed him deep into his seat. The G-forces pulled at his face. His vision narrowed at the edges. His eyes locked onto the sleek shape that had just blasted past his formation. The German Me-262 jet screamed through the air at impossible speed, over 500 miles per hour. The sound came after the plane had already passed. This revolutionary aircraft represented everything Nazi Germany believed about technological superiority. Its designers had created a weapon specifically to sweep American bombers from European skies forever. But the pilot strapped inside that cutting-edge machine had made one critical error in judgment. He had looked at the red-painted tails behind him and assumed weakness. The Luftwaffe had received detailed intelligence briefings about these particular pilots. Those reports dismissed them with casual certainty. Poorly trained, the documents stated, naturally less capable, racially unsuited for the brutal demands of aerial combat. German propaganda had filled their pilots with dangerous confidence. These American aviators would crumble under pressure, they were told. Their primitive reflexes would abandon them in the chaos of high-altitude warfare. The complex split-second decisions required in dogfighting were beyond their capabilities. Every Nazi pilot believed this completely. What unfolded in the skies over Berlin that afternoon transcended simple military engagement. This was ideology meeting reality at 25,000 feet. Racist assumptions colliding with trained excellence at 400 miles per hour. Men who had been dismissed their entire lives as inadequate were about to deliver a masterclass in aerial warfare. The Tuskegee Airmen prepared to teach the Luftwaffe a lesson written in tracer fire and shattered canopies. Superiority had nothing to do with skin color. Everything to do with training quality, courage depth, and aim precision. This story reveals how American pilots denied basic rights in their homeland, flew into combat against enemies who considered them subhuman. They emerged as the most feared escort fighters in the entire European theater. July 19, 1941. Tuskegee Army Airfield sat baking under the Alabama sun. The temperature was already climbing toward 95 degrees at 0600 hours. The men who reported for primary flight training that sweltering morning carried invisible weight with their standard equipment. Every piece of gear issued to Army Air Cadets was there, but they carried much more. The burden of a skeptical nation pressed on their shoulders. A military establishment that questioned their intelligence, reflexes, and courage for aerial combat watched their every move. The Tuskegee experiment earned its cynical name from War Department memoranda. Senior officers had designed this program expecting complete failure. Internal Army documents declassified 3 decades later revealed the true intentions. Senior officers expected perhaps a handful of marginally competent pilots. These men could be relegated to non-combat roles safely. This would prove once and for all that racial integration of elite combat units was completely impractical. The evidence would be undeniable. Colonel Frederick von Kimball put the expectations in writing during August 1941. His letter to the War Department stated the belief bluntly: the Negro lacks mental capacity for split-second decision-making required in aerial combat. This program will demonstrate once and for all that integration of combat aviation is impossible. The conclusion was predetermined. The training program structure at Tuskegee deliberately exceeded all standard requirements. White aviation cadets faced a 50-hour primary training requirement. Tuskegee cadets were required to complete 65 hours minimum. Their academic coursework included advanced mathematics that other cadets never saw, physics calculations beyond standard Army Air Corps curriculum, Meteorology at levels reserved for senior officers. The washout rate was intentionally calibrated higher than any other training facility. Performance that would earn acceptance for white cadets resulted in immediate elimination for black trainees. The standards were impossible by design. The message was clear without being spoken. The physical facilities reflected the Army's true expectations for success. Tuskegee Army Airfield had been hastily constructed on 1,600 acres of Alabama farmland. The location was deliberately isolated from all existing military installations. The base lacked proper hangars for aircraft maintenance. Adequate maintenance facilities were nowhere to be found. Sufficient training aircraft remained a constant problem. Initial instruction was conducted using worn-out PT-17 Stearman biplanes. These aircraft had already been discarded by white training facilities as unsafe for continued use. The engines were tired. The fabric covering showed patches and repairs. The instruments were unreliable. These cast-off machines were considered good enough for the experiment. The first class of cadets numbered 13 men who would become Aviation Cadet Class 42C. They faced instructors who had been selected with extreme care. Chief Instructor Charles Alfred Anderson was one of only a handful of licensed black pilots in America. His logbook showed over 3,500 flight hours, more experience than most military instructors possessed. His assistant instructors were similarly overqualified for their positions. They possessed commercial pilot licenses earned through years of struggle. Thousands of hours of flight experience filled their logbooks. These civilian instructors understood something military leadership refused to acknowledge. These cadets weren't being trained simply to pass the program. They were being trained to be absolutely undeniable. First Lieutenant Raymond Cassidy was one of the few white officers assigned to Tuskegee who actively supported the program. His private correspondence documented what he witnessed daily. These men are being held to standards that would eliminate 90% of white cadets, he wrote to his wife. Yet they persist through everything thrown at them. They study until midnight every single night. Practice until their hands shake from complete exhaustion. Return the next morning ready to prove themselves all over again. The first solo flights occurred during September 1941. Students who had survived the impossible standards finally flew alone. Their instructors watched from the ground as months of preparation culminated in individual flight. By December, when Pearl Harbor transformed every American military calculation overnight, 12 men had earned their wings. 12 pilots who had survived a program specifically designed to prove they couldn't succeed. The Army Air Corps suddenly needed pilots desperately. The question was whether they would actually accept the ones they already had trained and ready. April 15, 1943. Farjuna Airfield in North Africa baked under the desert sun. The clock showed 1120 hours when the 99th Fighter Squadron touched down on the dusty runway. Their arrival carried the hopes of an entire community. The skepticism of an entire military establishment came with them. Equipped with P-40 Warhawk fighters, the squadron's 27 pilots represented the first combat deployment of black aviators in American military history. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Davis, Jr. commanded the 99th. He understood the impossible mathematics of their situation perfectly. Success would be measured differently for his men than for any other fighter squadron. According to intercepted German intelligence documents captured later during the Tunisia campaign, Luftwaffe commanders had been briefed about the experimental Negro Squadron. Their assessments were dismissive and confident. One German intelligence summary dated April 10, 1943, stated the situation clearly. Enemy has deployed racially inferior pilots to Mediterranean theater. Expect minimal combat effectiveness from this unit. Our units may exploit this obvious weakness for tactical advantage. The German assessment would prove catastrophically wrong. But not immediately, not obviously. The failure would take time to reveal itself. The 99th's first weeks in combat were deliberately constrained by American command structure. While white fighter squadrons received bomber escort assignments, the missions that produced aerial victories and recognition, the 99th was relegated to coastal patrol duties, strafing missions against ground targets, reconnaissance flights over empty desert, safe assignments where failure was impossible but success was meaningless. Major Harold Winters served as operations officer for the 33rd Fighter Group. The 99th was attached to his unit. His diary entries revealed the frustration of watching talent wasted. "Command doesn't want them to fail publicly," he wrote during late April. "So they're given missions where failure is impossible. But success is meaningless under these conditions. It's professional castration disguised as careful introduction to combat." The breakthrough came on July 2, 1943, during the invasion of Sicily. The 99th finally received orders for bomber escort duty, 16 P-40s protecting 25 Mitchell bombers attacking Castelvetrano airfield. The mission would test everything they had trained for. At 14:47 hours, approximately 40 miles northwest of the target, 8 Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighters of JG-77 attacked the formation from above. Flight Officer Willie Ashley flew tail-end Charlie position. He spotted the German fighters diving from 18,000 feet. His radio call was calm and professional. "Bandits, 6 o'clock high, coming fast." This transmission initiated the engagement that would define the squadron's reputation forever. The dogfight lasted exactly 11 minutes of intense maneuvering. When the aerial battle ended, 2 FW-190s were confirmed destroyed. 1, probably, destroyed. 2 damaged and limping home. The bombers reached their target without a single loss. The 99th suffered no casualties whatsoever. Every pilot returned to base safely. The German pilots who survived returned to base with reports that directly contradicted their briefings. Luftwaffe combat records captured after the war included detailed debriefs from JG-77 pilots. They described aggressive and skilled opponents who fought with discipline unusual for inexperienced pilots. Their tactics were sound. Their marksmanship was deadly accurate. One German pilot, Oberfeldwebel Franz Stiegler, noted in his personal logbook the reality he had encountered. "The intelligence assessment of these American pilots was dangerously wrong," he wrote. "They fight very well indeed. This is not what we were told to expect." But success in combat brought unexpected new challenges from an unexpected source. Time magazine published an article on September 20, 1943, questioning the 99th's combat effectiveness. This happened despite their confirmed victories and perfect bomber protection record. The article cited unnamed military sources. These sources claimed the squadron showed high tension under pressure. Lack of aggressive spirit in combat. The story coincided perfectly with a War Department review considering whether to disband the entire program. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was recalled to Washington to defend his pilots. He testified before a Pentagon review board filled with skeptical generals. While he answered hostile questions in Washington, his squadron continued flying combat missions over Sicily and Italy. They compiled a record that would eventually silence their critics forever. Not through words or testimony, through an unbroken string of bomber escort missions where not a single bomber was lost to enemy fighters. June 9, 1944, Ramatelli Airfield in Italy. The clock showed 05:45 hours. The transformation was finally complete. The 99th Fighter Squadron had been joined by 3 additional squadrons. The 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons formed the 332nd Fighter Group. More importantly, they had transitioned from war-weary P-40 Warhawks to the aircraft that would make them legendary. The North American P-51 Mustang. The P-51D Mustang represented the absolute pinnacle of American fighter design. Top speed of 437 miles per hour in level flight. Service ceiling of 41,900 feet. Combat radius of 1,000 miles when equipped with drop tanks for extended range. The Mustang could escort bombers deep into the heart of Germany. It could fight on completely equal terms with any aircraft the Luftwaffe could put into the sky, but it was the paint scheme that would make the 332nd instantly recognizable to friend and enemy alike. Following standard practice for identifying friendly fighters, the 332nd painted the tails of their Mustangs bright red. The color was visible for miles in clear air. Bomber crews began calling them red tails with genuine affection. German pilots would soon develop less flattering names for the same aircraft. Colonel Davis now commanded the entire group. He had instituted a tactical doctrine that deliberately deviated from standard fighter escort practice. Other escort groups would break formation to chase German fighters. Individual pilots accumulated personal victory credits. Glory and recognition came from confirmed kills. Davis issued explicit orders documented in the 332nd's Operations Manual. Stay with the bombers at all times. Your mission is to get them to the target and bring them home again safely. Personal glory is completely secondary to mission success. This doctrine would produce a remarkable statistic. Over 200 bomber escort missions flown by the 332nd Fighter Group between June 1944 and April 1945. Not a single bomber under their protection was lost to enemy fighters. This protection record was unmatched by any other fighter group in the entire 15th Air Force. The achievement came with a price measured in aerial combat. Luftwaffe tactical doctrine called for concentrating attacks on bomber formations. The attacks came from directions opposite the escort fighters. This forced escorts to choose between pursuing attackers or maintaining protective formation. German fighter pilots had learned through bitter experience that most American escort fighters would pursue the attackers. This left bombers temporarily vulnerable to follow-up attacks. The Red Tails didn't pursue lone attackers. They adapted their tactics to the mission requirements. The tactical modification developed by the 332nd became known as box formation escort. Instead of flying traditional high-cover positions above the bombers, Red Tail flights positioned themselves in a defensive box surrounding the entire bomber formation. Aircraft were stationed above the bombers, below the bombers, on both flanks of the formation. When German fighters attacked from any direction, the nearest Red Tail flight would intercept immediately. Other flights would shift position to cover the gap left behind. This maintained continuous protection throughout the engagement. German pilots found themselves forced to fight through the escorts to reach the bombers. This created exactly the engagement geometry that favored the defenders. Luftwaffe loss reports from summer 1944 show increasing casualties among fighters attempting to attack bomber formations escorted by Die Roten Schwanze, the Red Tails. June 9, 1944, would test these new tactics under the most demanding conditions possible. 60 P-51 Mustangs of the 332nd Fighter Group escorted 47 flying fortresses attacking oil refineries in Munich. German controllers scrambled over 100 fighters from 3 different Jagdgeschwader to intercept this formation. The battle would rage for 45 minutes across 200 miles of German airspace. June 9, 1944. 12-15 hours, 24,000 feet over Bavaria. Captain Edward Gleed led Able Flight through the thin air. He spotted them first through the crystal-clear atmosphere. A swarm of approximately 30 Messerschmitt Bf-109s climbing aggressively from the southeast. Their contrails marked their ascent, like chalk lines drawn against the brilliant blue German sky. His radio call was calm and professional despite the approaching threat. Bandits 3 o'clock Angels 22 climbing hard. Looks like they want to play today. The transmission alerted every red-tail pilot to the incoming danger. The German formation was led by Hauptmann Wolfgang Fischer of JG-53, a veteran pilot with 47 confirmed victories painted on his aircraft fuselage. Fischer's tactical assessment was recorded in his post-mission report. This document was later recovered from Luftwaffe archives after the war. It revealed his initial confidence about the engagement. "Spotted enemy escort fighters with red tail markings," he wrote. "Intelligence has identified these as the Negro Squadron. Expected minimal resistance based on racial assessments. Ordered aggressive attack on bomber formation to exploit this weakness." Fischer's expectations would be completely shattered in the next 8 minutes of combat. As the Bf-109s reached attack altitude, they encountered something unexpected. Not the scattered escorts they could easily bypass. Instead, they found a coordinated defensive wall of Mustangs. Lieutenant Clarence "Lucky" Lester flew wing position in able flight. He maintained perfect formation discipline as German fighters screamed past at high speed. The Germans were trying to draw the Americans away from the bombers. Standard Luftwaffe tactics called for this approach. The red tails held their positions exactly as trained. The Luftwaffe pilots found themselves forced into the engagement they most wanted to avoid. A turning fight against fresh escorts with altitude advantage. When the first German element committed to an attack run on the B-17s, Captain Gleed's flight rolled inverted and dove. They intercepted the Messerschmitts at a combined closure rate exceeding 600 miles per hour. The technical specifications of the P-51D gave the Americans critical advantages in this type of engagement. The Mustang's laminar flow wing design provided superior high-altitude performance. The Merlin engine maintained full power at altitudes where German fighters began losing effectiveness. Most critically, the 650 caliber machine guns, each loaded with 400 rounds of ammunition, provided devastating firepower when properly applied. Lieutenant Lester achieved firing position on a Bf-109. The range closed from 1,200 yards to 400 yards before he triggered a 3-second burst. His after-action report filed at 18:30 hours that evening described the result with clinical precision. "Observed strikes on enemy aircraft fuselage and wing root area," he wrote. "Enemy aircraft rolled left, trailing white smoke and glycol coolant. Pilot did not attempt to bail out of damaged aircraft. Aircraft entered unrecoverable spin and crashed approximately 15 miles southeast of Munich. Confirmed destroyed. Hauptmann Fischer attempted to rally his scattered formation, but the tactical geometry had turned completely against him and his pilots. While his fighters tangled with the escort, the bombers, their actual target, proceeded unmolested toward Munich. Fischer broke off the engagement at 12:23 hours. He had lost 6 aircraft, confirmed destroyed, and 4 more damaged and barely flying. The bombers suffered absolutely no losses to enemy fighters. But the engagement over Munich was merely the opening act of a long day. As the bomber formation turned for home, German controllers scrambled additional fighters from airfields across southern Germany. Fresh pilots in fresh aircraft rose to intercept. The Red Tails would face 3 more separate interception attempts during the withdrawal. Each wave consisted of 25 to 40 aircraft spoiling for a fight. By the time the formation crossed back into Allied-controlled airspace at 14:56 hours, the 302nd Fighter Group had engaged approximately 120 German fighters. Multiple running battles across 200 miles of hostile territory. The final tally would shake Luftwaffe confidence and force complete reassessment of their intelligence on the Red Tails. June 9, 1944. 15:02 hours. Ramitelli Airfield Debriefing Room. The pilots of the 302nd Fighter Group filed into the debriefing room slowly. Their faces showed the strain of 4 hours of continuous combat operations. Intelligence officers armed with mission maps and combat report forms began the systematic process of documenting what had become the largest single engagement in the group's history. The numbers told a story that would reverberate through both American and German command structures for months. Confirmed enemy aircraft destroyed, 13. Probable destroys, 7. Damaged, 11. American losses, 2 P-51s with 1 pilot recovered and 1 missing in action. Most significantly, 0 bombers lost to enemy fighters, despite overwhelming German numerical superiority. But behind these cold statistics lay a more complex human reality that intelligence reports and victory credits couldn't fully capture. Second Lieutenant Robert Williams had not returned from the mission. His wingman, Lieutenant Harold Sawyer, filed a detailed combat report describing Williams' final moments in combat. "We engaged 2 Bf-109s attacking the bomber formation," Sawyer wrote. Williams scored solid hits on the first enemy aircraft, which broke away trailing heavy smoke. The second enemy aircraft achieved firing position on Williams's tail. I called for him to break left immediately, but observed no response to my radio call. Enemy fire struck Williams's aircraft in the engine compartment. I observed him slumped forward in the cockpit. Aircraft entered uncontrolled descent. No parachute observed. Williams was exactly 23 years old. He had graduated from Tuskegee in Class 44A. He had been in combat for exactly 47 days. He left behind a wife and infant daughter in Birmingham, Alabama. They would receive a telegram within 72 hours informing them of his loss. The human cost of proving racial equality at 25,000 feet was measured in young men who would never grow old. The 302nd Fighter Group's casualty rate reflected this cost. 66 pilots killed in action or missing over a 12-month period. This represented a 16% annual loss rate. The figure was comparable to other elite fighter groups, but devastating to a community that had invested everything in these men's success. Every loss carried the weight of shattered dreams and unfulfilled potential. German intelligence files captured after the war revealed the impact of the June 9th engagement on Luftwaffe tactical assessments. A JG-53 intelligence summary, dated June 12, 1944, marked secret, stated the new reality bluntly. Previous assessments of enemy Negro fighter pilots must be completely and immediately revised. These pilots demonstrate tactical discipline, marksmanship, and aggressive spirit equal to or exceeding other American fighter units. Recommend all pilots be briefed that previous racial assessments are completely invalid. These are first-rate opponents requiring maximum respect. The assessment represented a complete reversal of German racial ideology when confronted with undeniable battlefield reality. Nazi propaganda had proclaimed Aryan racial superiority as fundamental scientific truth. The Red Tails were systematically demolishing that ideology with 50-caliber arguments delivered at 400 miles per hour. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, Supreme Commander of the Luftwaffe, reportedly responded to reports of German pilots being shot down by black American aviators with absolute fury. He demanded immediate investigations into whether the reports were actually accurate. His racist worldview simply could not accommodate the reality that racially inferior pilots were killing his carefully trained German aviators. But the most significant impact wasn't measured in German command confusion or ideological crisis. It was measured in the bomber crews who returned home safely because Red Tail escorts had protected them throughout their missions. Technical Sergeant James Morrison, a B-17 ball turret gunner, wrote in a letter home dated June 11, 1944. "We got jumped by what looked like half the Luftwaffe yesterday," he told his family. "Those red-tail boys stayed with us the whole way home, didn't chase after glory or personal victories, just kept the Germans off our backs when we needed them most. I owe them my life, and I'll never forget it." March 24, 1945, 1340 hours, 28,000 feet over Berlin. The most technologically advanced fighter aircraft in operational service anywhere in the world screamed past Captain Robert Dice's P-51 Mustang. The closure rate defied human comprehension. The Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter was powered by two Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines. Each engine produced 1,880 pounds of thrust. Combined, they could push the aircraft to speeds of 540 miles per hour. Nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the best the Mustang could achieve. The appearance of German jet fighters in late 1944 had threatened to completely revolutionize air combat over Europe. The Me-262's incredible speed made conventional fighter interception nearly impossible. Its devastating armament of four 30mm Mk-108 cannons could destroy a heavy bomber with a single well-placed burst. German aviation commanders placed desperate faith in their revolutionary jets. These aircraft would supposedly reclaim air dominance despite facing overwhelming odds. 10-1. Those numbers haunted Luftwaffe planning rooms, but the sleek Me-262 carried fatal flaws that experienced enemy pilots could turn against them. The revolutionary Jumal engines demanded delicate handling. Throttle movements required surgical precision. High-altitude operations triggered dangerous flameouts without warning. Spooling up from idle power settings consumed precious seconds. Seconds that could mean death in aerial combat. The jets possessed one critical weakness that skilled fighter pilots understood completely. Long straight approaches became mandatory for effective attacks on bomber formations. Those predictable flight paths created perfect opportunities for alert escort fighters. Enemy pilots studied these patterns. They waited for the moment when speed meant nothing. American intelligence officers had dissected every aspect of jet fighter tactics. Captain Dice absorbed these briefings with methodical attention. He understood the mathematical certainty of aerial combat. The Me-262 pilot would need to slow down, commit to a firing solution, accept vulnerability in exchange for accuracy. Superior speed became meaningless once forced into turning engagements. The Mustang's maneuverability advantage dominated close combat situations. Physics favored the conventional fighter in tight quarters. German jet pilots knew this reality. They planned accordingly. The enemy pilot facing Captain Dice that day was no inexperienced rookie. Oberleutnant Heinrich Bahr of JG-7 carried tremendous combat experience. Over 200 confirmed victories decorated his record. Germany's veteran pilot corps had been decimated by years of attrition warfare. Bahr represented the surviving elite. His captured combat report revealed sophisticated tactical thinking. Intelligence identified the bomber formation first. Red-tailed Mustang escorts provided protection. The plan called for high-speed diving attack from 32,000 feet. Penetrate the escort screen before enemy fighters could respond. Execute attack run at maximum velocity. Bahr's approach brought devastating speed through the American formation. 550 miles per hour. A blur of metal and destruction. But Captain Dice had positioned his flight with calculated precision. Altitude advantage specifically countered high-speed diving attacks. Experience guided tactical placement. The Me-262 committed to its firing run according to doctrine. Dice responded with textbook interception technique. Roll inverted. Pull through. Dive to intercept. The geometry of aerial combat reduced to simple mathematics. Vectors. velocities, closing angles. The engagement offered Dyes perhaps 3 seconds of opportunity. The jet flashed past at tremendous speed. His combat report, filed at 1920 hours, captured the moment with precise language. Led target by approximately 6 aircraft lengths. Range 800 yards. Fire 2-second burst. Observe strikes on enemy jet aircraft starboard engine. Enemy aircraft trailing flame and smoke. Attempted climb, but starboard engine exploded catastrophically. Aircraft rolled inverted. Entered flat spin. Observed pilot eject at approximately 18,000 feet. Oberleutnant Barr survived the encounter. American ground forces captured him 3 days later. His interrogation report includes revealing observations about the aerial opposition he faced. British pilots fought with determination. American pilots showed excellent training. Russian pilots attacked with savage aggression. The colored American pilots demonstrated tactical awareness equal to the finest opposition encountered. Shooting accuracy matched the best enemy pilots faced throughout the war. The assumption of inferior capability was propaganda nonsense. This false intelligence cost experienced German pilots their lives. The engagement over Berlin represented far more than individual combat success. Superior technology failed against superior tactics. Training made the difference. Determination overcame mechanical advantage. Race played no role in aerial combat effectiveness. April 1, 1945, 08:30 hours. Ramitelli Airfield buzzed with final mission briefing activity. The European war was grinding toward its inevitable conclusion, but the Luftwaffe remained a deadly adversary. Desperation made them more dangerous rather than less threatening. German commanders threw everything available into combat operations. Jets screamed through the sky. Conventional fighters attacked in massive formations. Obsolete training aircraft were pressed into desperate service. The mission briefing called for deep penetration into enemy territory. B-17s would bomb railroad marshalling yards. Berlin's industrial suburbs were targeted. Colonel Davis addressed his assembled pilots with measured authority. His tone remained steady after 2 years of combat leadership. Intelligence indicates heavy fighter opposition today. The Germans understand they're losing this war. That knowledge makes them more dangerous opponents. Desperate men take desperate chances. Maintain discipline. Stay with the bombers. Bring everyone home alive. The formation lifting off from Ramitelli at 09:15 hours was massive. 64 P-51 Mustangs with distinctive red tails. The largest single mission deployment in 332nd history. They would rendezvous with bomber streams over the Adriatic Sea. The escort mission would cross Austria into Germany. Round-trip distance exceeded 1,600 miles. Flight time would approach 6 hours. At 12:15 hours, the formation crossed into German airspace. Altitude 26,000 feet. First interceptors appeared immediately. A mixed group of approximately 40 Bf-109s and FW-190s. The engagement followed familiar tactical patterns developed through months of combat experience. German fighters attempted drawing escorts away from bombers. Feint attacks from multiple directions. The Red Tails refused the obvious bait. Formation discipline remained intact. They engaged only enemies who committed to genuine attack runs. Those who threatened the bombers faced immediate interception. Lieutenant William Hill flew in white flight that day. His after-action report described the tactical situation clearly. Enemy fighters made multiple approaches from various angles. They searched constantly for gaps in escort coverage. Each committed attack brought immediate interception from nearest flight. Adjacent flights shifted position to maintain coverage. The Germans found themselves consistently forced to fight through escort formations rather than around them. After 30 minutes of this pattern, their attacks became less coordinated. Fuel states forced sequential disengagement. The bomber formation continued unharmed. The most significant engagement occurred at 13:42 hours precisely. The bomber formation began its attack run on target. German controllers had held back 4 Me-262 jets specifically for this moment. They calculated escorts would be most vulnerable during bombing runs. Bombers maintained straight and level flight for accuracy. Captain Armour McDaniel led Blue Flight at 29,000 feet. He spotted jets climbing from northeast quadrant. His radio call remained unhurried despite the immediate threat. Blue leader to all flights. 4 bandits 2 o'clock high. Climbing fast. Looks like jets. Blue Flight engaging. All other flights maintain position. 4 Mustangs of Blue Flight dove to intercept the climbing jets. They accepted speed disadvantage to prevent jets reaching firing position. The Me-262s were forced to maneuver, avoiding diving Mustangs. Perfect approach geometry was lost. Tactical advantage evaporated. When jets attempted repositioning for another attack run, Lieutenant Charles Bailey achieved firing position. The trailing jet became his target. Bailey's gunnery reflected hundreds of training hours. Dozens of combat engagements had honed his skills. A 3-second burst struck Me-262 port engine directly. Range 600 yards. The jet engine exploded spectacularly. Flames engulfed the entire nacelle. The aircraft rolled inverted before pilot ejection became possible. Remaining 3 jets broke off attack immediately. Alert and aggressive opposition discouraged further attempts. Bombers completed their runs unmolested. 36 B-17s flew under red tail protection that day. All 36 returned to base safely. The 332nd lost 1 aircraft to ground fire during withdrawal. The pilot successfully bailed out over friendly territory. He returned to squadron operations within 72 hours. General Ira Eaker commanded Mediterranean Allied Air Forces. His personal message to Colonel Davis arrived that evening. The performance of 332nd Fighter Group continues setting standards for bomber escort operations. Today's mission exemplifies professionalism and combat effectiveness. This has become your unit's trademark. Well done! For 332nd pilots, the mission represented something beyond professional recognition. They had proven mission after mission that excellence transcended color. Every bomber brought home safely hammered another nail into racist ideology's coffin. Performance spoke louder than prejudice. Results mattered more than race. April 15, 1945. Nazi Germany's collapse was visible from cockpit altitude. Red tail escorts accompanied bomber formations deeper into disintegrating enemy territory. Evidence of total defeat sprawled across the landscape below. Burned tank columns littered roadsides. Abandoned equipment scattered everywhere. Refugee columns fled westward in desperation. Cities were reduced to rubble by months of strategic bombing. Yet Luftwaffe pilots continued fighting with desperate courage. Many were teenagers with minimal training. They threw themselves against American formations with more bravery than skill. Experienced veterans led these attacks. Survivors of years of attrition warfare fought with grim determination. April 15th brought one of 332nd Fighter Group's final major combat missions. B-24 Liberators attacked Skoda Armament Works in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. The target remained critical to remaining German war production. Luftwaffe commanders committed significant resources to defense operations. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown led a flight of 4 Mustangs that day. He encountered 3 Me-262 jets, attempting bomber formation interception at 15:23 hours. The jets had adapted tactics based on previous encounters with red tails. Multiple angle approaches divided escort attention more effectively. Brown had studied jet tactics extensively throughout recent months. Captured German training manuals provided valuable intelligence. Interrogation reports from captured Me-262 pilots revealed tactical patterns. Brown's innovation would be documented in post-war Air Force tactical studies. Rather than pursuing jets during high-speed passes, Brown positioned his flight between jets and their probable egress routes. He anticipated the direction they would need for escape after completing attack runs. The Me-262s committed to attack geometry found themselves flying directly into Brown's firing line during disengagement attempts. Brown's combat report described the engagement with clinical precision. The lead jet aircraft passed bomber formation and began climbing left turn to egress. Positioning had been accomplished to intercept this maneuver. Range 1,000 feet. Fired 4-second burst. Observed strikes on aircraft fuselage and both engines. Enemy aircraft canopy separated. Pilot ejected successfully. Aircraft crashed approximately 20 miles east of Pilsen. This victory made Lieutenant Brown one of few Allied pilots to destroy Me-262 in air-to-air combat. The distinction earned recognition as one of the war's premier fighter pilots. Brown's post-war reflections revealed something more profound than personal achievement. He didn't shoot down that jet because he was black. He didn't shoot it down despite being black. He shot it down because of proper training. Superior equipment played a role. Determination made the difference. That became the lesson of Tuskegee Airmen. Provide proper training and opportunity. People will demonstrate their true capabilities. The Pilsen mission marked culmination of 332nd Combat Record. Between June 1944 and April 1945, the group flew 200 bomber escort missions. They engaged enemy aircraft on 112 occasions. 111 German aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat. An additional 150 were destroyed during ground strafing missions. The defining statistic remained unmatched throughout the war. Not one bomber under their direct escort was lost to enemy fighters. This record contrasted sharply with overall 15th Air Force experience. Bomber losses to fighters averaged 46 per 1,000 sorties. Mathematical impact was stark. Red-tailed escorts reduced bomber losses by nearly 100%. General Carl Spaatz commanded United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe. His final report included specific commendation of 332nd performance. The combat record demonstrates that properly trained and led units achieve exceptional results. Ethnic composition of personnel proved irrelevant to combat capability. This unit's performance should permanently end doubts about Negro personnel combat capabilities. Military leadership acknowledged red-tailed achievements as the war concluded. The pilots themselves understood their deeper victory. They had destroyed more than German aircraft. The myth of racial inferiority had been shattered in aerial combat's most demanding arena. Performance against determined enemies provided irrefutable proof. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Ramatelli Airfield fell silent as announcement crackled through mounted speakers. The European war was finished. Germany had surrendered unconditionally. 6 years of conflict consuming millions of lives had devastated an entire continent. The guns finally fell silent across European battlefields. Complex emotions filled 332nd Fighter Group pilots on this momentous day. Relief at personal survival mixed with grief for 66 pilots who hadn't returned. Pride in accomplishments battled awareness that their larger struggle continued. Combat victory was complete. Social victory remained unfinished. Combat statistics compiled by 15th Air Force historians revealed an extraordinary story. The 332nd Fighter Group flew 1,578 combat missions during active operations. They completed 15,533 individual sorties over 200 operational days. Enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat totaled 111, with 150 more damaged. Ground strafing attacks destroyed 150 additional German aircraft. Numerous trains, trucks, and military installations were eliminated. Awards earned included 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses. 14 Bronze Stars recognized exceptional service. 744 Air Medals honored combat participation. 8 Purple Hearts commemorated wounds received in action. Presidential Unit Citation recognized March 24, 1945 mission when they engaged over 100 enemy aircraft while protecting bomber formations. 3 pilots achieved ace status, with 5 or more confirmed aerial victories each. But the statistic that mattered most couldn't be found in official records. It wasn't documented in awards citations. It was written in bomber crew survival rates under red tail protection. Grateful Airmen Letters Home credited red tails with saving lives. The unprecedented fact remained that not single bomber under direct escort was lost to enemy fighters. Captain Edward Thomas wrote in his personal journal on VE Day. The entry captured deeper significance of their achievement. They came to prove flying and fighting ability equaled anyone. They proved much more than that. Excellence knows no color. Courage isn't determined by race. Equal opportunity and training allow men to meet any challenge. Prejudice claims about inability were proven false. Return home brought its own unique challenges. These men had flown the world's most advanced fighters. They had outfought Luftwaffe's best pilots. They had protected bomber crews through war's deadliest skies. They returned to America, where restaurants wouldn't serve them. Hotels wouldn't house them. Many whites still believed in their inherent inferiority. The contradiction was stark and painful to endure. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Davis, Jr. would eventually become Air Force's first black 4-star general. His autobiography described the situation clearly. They had fought for America, while America fought against accepting them as equals. Combat had proven their capabilities. Many refused to acknowledge the proof, yet they never questioned whether the fight was worth fighting. History would vindicate their efforts. History did vindicate them, though the process required decades. Tuskegee Airmen became symbols of military excellence and civil rights progress. Their combat record provided irrefutable evidence that discrimination was based on prejudice rather than performance. Arguments about black soldiers' inability to perform at highest combat levels had been demolished at 25,000 feet over Europe. President Harry Truman's 1948 executive order desegregating the military cited combat performance of units like 332nd Fighter Group. Evidence proved segregation served no military purpose. Discrimination actually harmed American military capabilities. Red tails had proven armed forces would be stronger drawing from all citizens equally. March 2007 brought long overdue recognition. President George W. Bush awarded Congressional Gold Medal collectively to Tuskegee Airmen. The ceremony recognized military achievements and civil rights advancement. Surviving red tails attended. These elderly men in their 80s and 90s received recognition that should have come 60 years earlier. Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy was among last surviving red tail pilots. He spoke at the ceremony with characteristic humility. They didn't fly missions to become heroes. They flew because their country needed them. Bomber crews needed protection. They had something to prove, not to themselves, but to everyone who claimed it couldn't be done. Red tails proved it could be accomplished. They proved capability in skies over Germany, Austria, Romania, and Czechoslovakia. They proved it through 15,533 combat sorties without losing single bomber to enemy fighters. They proved it by destroying 100 laden German aircraft and damaging 150 more. They proved it earning 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses and Presidential Unit Citation. Most importantly, they proved that artificial barriers removal reveals unlimited human capability. Race, ethnicity, and prejudice impose no real limits on achievement. Contrails they left across European skies during desperate months of 1944 and 1945 have long since dissipated. The trail they blazed toward equality and recognition remains visible. A navigation beacon for future generations seeking to chart courses toward excellence. German pilots who faced them learned the hardest lesson possible. Racist ideology crumbles when confronted with reality delivered at 400 miles per hour. Luftwaffe assessment of red tails evolved from dismissive contempt to wary respect to genuine fear. This transformation was documented in captured German records and prisoner interrogations. Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler was a German ace who survived the war. His logbook contained entries about intelligence assessments being dangerously wrong regarding these American pilots. In 1992, he met several Tuskegee airmen at a reunion event. His simple acknowledgement spoke volumes. "You were the best pilots we faced, the absolute best." That recognition from a former enemy who had believed Nazi racial theories represents perhaps the most profound validation of red tail accomplishments. They didn't just win individual battles. They won the fundamental argument about human capability and worth. The testing ground was the most rigorous imaginable: survival in aerial combat against determined opposition. Today, their legacy lives in every integrated military unit. Every diverse cockpit carries their influence. Every young pilot of color who looks skyward sees possibility rather than barriers. Red tails flew into history. They also flew into the future they helped create. A future where excellence is measured by performance, not pigmentation. Where opportunities are determined by capability, not color. The 21-gun salute that echoed across Ramitelli Airfield on VE Day, 1945, has long since faded into memory. But the message red tails delivered through skill, courage, determination, and 15,533 combat sorties continues resonating through time. Given equal opportunity and proper training, humans will demonstrate their true capabilities. That lesson, purchased with courage over European skies, remains their most enduring victory. The mathematical precision of their success speaks across decades. 0 bombers lost to enemy fighters under direct escort. 111 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 15,533 combat sorties completed. 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses earned through exceptional performance. But numbers tell only part of their story. The complete narrative includes shattered assumptions about racial capability, demolished arguments about combat effectiveness, proven superiority of merit over prejudice, demonstrated power of opportunity over discrimination. Their propellers have stopped spinning. Their engines have cooled silent. Their aircraft rest in museums rather than flight lines. But their example continues inspiring new generations. The sky they opened remains open. The barriers they broke remain broken. The proof they provided remains irrefutable. Excellence has no color. Courage recognizes no racial boundaries. Skill transcends ethnic categories. Performance matters more than prejudice. These truths were written across European skies, in cannon fire and contrails. Written by men who refused to accept limitations others tried to impose. Written in victories that changed military policy and social attitudes forever. The red-tailed legacy extends far beyond World War II aviation history. It encompasses fundamental questions about human potential, about artificial barriers to achievement, about the power of opportunity to reveal capability, about courage required to challenge entrenched prejudice through superior performance. Their story reminds us that progress often comes through individual excellence rather than social revolution, through quiet competence rather than loud protest, through demonstrated capability rather than demanded recognition, through results that speak louder than rhetoric. The young men who painted their tails red and their reputations in aerial combat victories understood they carried more than ammunition into battle. They carried hopes and dreams of an entire community, expectations and aspirations of future generations. The weight of proving human worth transcends artificial categories. They succeeded beyond their commanders' expectations, beyond their enemies' fears, beyond their own ambitious dreams. They succeeded so completely that their achievements became impossible to ignore or dismiss. Their record became irrefutable evidence of what was possible when opportunity matched capability.